In this video, we are going to take our movies collection that we have stored in Cloud Firestore and work with a React application where we'll be able to do the fundamental operations of working with a persistent data store. So those are creating, reading, updating, and deleting data. So we're going to learn how to do all of those in this movies collection from our React application. And one sort of general tip to keep in mind is that interacting with Firebase is just a matter of using the JavaScript API. So pulling up this documentation and say like looking at the add data page when you're trying to add data, and nothing here is React specific. So if you get lost as you're working in React, talking to your Firestore database, one tip is to go ahead and just open up a regular JavaScript file, no React in there, and work out your logic. Like do something like this in your file, make sure that it works, and then you can take that working logic and figure out how to fit it into your React application. So to start with, let me show you the final application that we're going to be building. It'll look something like this, where we're going to have a landing page that lists all of the ratings that the user has entered into the database, and whatever information is associated with it. So title, rating, year, but as you add more things to your database, more things will show up in each of these cards. By building out this page, we'll learn how to read data from the database. Then we will also work on adding new things to the database. So I could add I'm just gonna put a test movie in here, give it a rating of 4, 2019, give it a save, and then flip back over to the add movies, the all movies tab, and we can see that new test movie is here with that rating and year. So all of this has been added to our database, and it's probably this first one here. Yeah, test movie 2019, rating of 4. So going through this page, we will learn how to do the create part of the create, read, update, delete. And then we will learn how to add this delete button to each of these elements. So say we added a movie and then we decide we no longer want to track that in our database, we can go ahead and delete it, which will remove it from our database. So now that entry that was there is gone. And then the last thing we will learn is how to update a piece of data. So let's say, thinking about it, like the user comes back, color out of space, maybe I want to update that rating from a 1 to a 2. We will figure out how to create an edit page where it loads the data from the database. Then you're able to change one of those pieces of data, save it, and see that it has been updated over here in your listing, and also has been updated here in our database. So even though this application is specific to movies, where we're creating a little application that the user can track the movies they've seen and their ratings and anything else they want to save related to that movie. Like maybe we want to add a little description field so someone can add a note about why they rated it 4 out of 5 here. Even though we're working with movies, this same thing that we're doing, this creating, reading, updating, and deleting of data from a database, would apply to any application that you're going to build. So if you are working on your final project, you can use this as kind of a template and refer back to the pieces of it, but you would fill in your own data. So maybe instead of making this movie rating application, you're making a to-do list. And so the listing here, maybe it'd be styled differently, but the core idea would be the same. You're going to load all of the tasks that the user has, and you'll have some form where the user can add new tasks, and you'll have some place where they can delete and edit those tasks. So this general thing, even though we're doing movies, it'll apply to your final projects in this class. Like we saw with the Pokemon React application that we built, we had to handle some more complex logic, and we're gonna have to do the same thing here. So it's useful to do a little bit of whiteboarding to see the flow before we dive into trying to code it. So we'll start with maybe just whiteboarding this movies page. So here I want to show the flow, and when our application loads, we're gonna have to go ahead and talk to our database before we can actually display anything. So we're gonna have like the nav, and it'll say movies. And then what we need to do is when this page loads, kick off a request to our database. And while that's loading, we'll display a little like loading spinner that is spinning around on the page here. So what's going to happen is that this will then turn into either a page where we have successful data, or we're going to have to also handle the logic where, there's some kind of error. So if we got data, then we can display the version of the page where it says movies, and then we have all of our cards on the page for each individual movie that we've got from the database. But if we got an error, we're going to have some kind of flow here where we have the title and then error message on the page instead of the movies. And all of our pages are going to kind of have this logic that when we have to talk to the database, we're going to have to handle the case where we get some data back that's valid and handle the case where there's an error. And it might be helpful to, for completeness sake, take maybe the add movie and do a little flow for that as well. So let's come over here. We'll have a page, nav, add movie, and then we have a little card here that has the form in it. And I will just abbreviate this. And this last thing is our play button, or our save button. So after the user goes ahead and edits this and clicks save, we're going to have to go into our loading flow. And somewhere on the page, we'll have to display some loading information. And so we may do that like in our button where it goes from saving, or it goes from saying, let's say, save here to saying saving. So this will trigger a operation to add to DB. And from here, we're going to have those two states again. There's one possible world in which that is successful. So saved, or we've got error here. So we'll have to do the same thing of making sure that we listen for successful data, listen for the error, and do something on the page to react to those things. So when it's successful, we may just have our form and we say something like saved successfully at the top. And if we've got an error, do a very similar thing, except somewhere on the page we will display the error. And one thing that I want to note is, like last time when we were dealing with errors and we were just doing a JavaScript application, we were printing them out to the console. But as we're moving into React, when there is an error, we can't just rely on the console for handling that error. What we have to do is actually display something on the page. And those errors could be caused by like the user's connection disappearing or something being broken in our Firebase configuration. So what we want to do is be able to display some kind of generic error message to the user, so they've got some idea that something went wrong. And we'll also log that error out to the console so that us as developers can look in and try and fix any errors that pop up. Okay, so this is our flow. All of our logic is going to have this kind of asynchronous programming to it that we're starting to get used to. And the other thing that I want to diagram before we head in is this acronym that's called CRUD, lovely acronym, that stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. And in terms of the basics of working with some kind of persistent storage like Cloud Firestore or other databases, these are the fundamental operations. You need to be able to create in your database, read something from your database, update something in your database, and delete something from your database. So I want to create a little bit of a roadmap for the features of the Cloud Firestore API that we're going to be learning. So it's really important to read the documentation, this Cloud Firestore documentation, going through all of these pages as you're working through your projects. But we'll make a little cheat sheet here. So we'll start with creating. So creating means adding something new to the database. And if you look in the sidebar here, we can see add and manage data. There is the add data subpage here, and it tells us that there are a couple of different ways that we can add data to our database. So we can, once we know the identifier of a document, which would be like this key here, we can just call the set command to change the data that's there. We can add a new document to the collection, which is what we did last time when we were adding movies, and Cloud Firestore automatically generates these unique identifiers for us when we do that. And then the last one is you can create an empty document and put some data into it. So kind of for our purposes and this roadmap, we want to focus in on this add a document method here. So once you go into your collection, oh, whoops, not this one. We want this one. So once you go into your collection and get a reference to it, you can call .add on that to insert a new document in there. And then you just pass in what you want to put in that document. So for our purposes, we'll say it's like a collection reference .add. That'll be the method that we use to put new data into our database. For reading data, we can come down here and we can see that there are a couple of ways that we can read data. So there is getting data once, which we did last time. So you can get a reference to a document by doing db.collection.doc to access one of those specific documents and then call .get. You can actually also call .get on the collection to get everything that's in the collection, which is something that we did before. And there's the docs on this page here for getting multiple documents from a collection. So if you call collection, you get a collection reference and then you call .get, that'll give you them all. There are also some ways that you can do some filtering, which we'll dig into later. Like you could filter to only grab things that meet some kind of condition. So for our purposes in our cheat sheet, we can say you can do a collection reference.get, or you can do a document reference.get. Document ref.get. So both of those will allow us to read data. When we need to listen to updates to data, so not just read it once, but read it continuously, we will also get into using the onSnapshot method, which is available from collection references and document references. So this allows you right here where you reach for a collection and then reach for a specific document, you can pass in a function that gets called anytime that document changes. So you can read changes to a document, and then if we look in the sidebar here, we can also listen to, do they have a good example here? Yeah, here we go. We can listen to a whole collection. So if we have a collection reference, we can also say on snapshot and get notified anytime the whole collection changes. So we're going to start with using collection reference.get, document reference.get, and then we'll also work in collection ref.onSnapshot. And same thing with document ref. So the next one is update in our little acronym here. So updating, for this one, it's actually looking back at that ad page. We already saw how to update, and updating involves calling this set. So if you have a reference to a specific document in a collection, you can say .set, and you will be able to change all of the fields that are set for whatever that document is. So if we have one of these keys and we call .set, we can change the rating, release year, and title for that piece of data in our database. And there is also, if we look down here under update a document, there's another thing that we can do if we have a reference to a document here. We can call .update, which will not override previous data. So this will just change the capital field of this document. It's not going to remove other fields. Whereas when we call .set, we're actually saying like, get rid of whatever was there. And instead, here are the fields that should be there. So we could write both of these down in our whiteboard diagram. We have collection, we have document ref dot set document ref dot update. Both of those will allow us to change a document. And then the last one, delete, we can call delete on a document reference. So if we reach into a collection, grab a document, we can call .delete on it to delete that document. And one word of warning here is that the recommendation is to not do deleting of a collection. If we wanted to get rid of the whole movies collection, that is not recommended. And the way to do it would be to reach into each document and call the delete method on it. But probably the best way to do that is to manage that yourself and just hop into the console here and go ahead and delete collection if you need to delete a whole collection. So for our purposes, building out this application, we will get a document reference, and then we will call .delete to get rid of that. Okay, so there we go. We have our little roadmap. We'll bring up the guides and we will look at all of these commands as we are building out our application. But it's also useful to just have them in the back of your head that these are the basic operations: create, read, update, delete. There's this CRUD acronym to help you remember it. And that'll be the fundamental set of sort of operations that you'll have to run to build any application with a database. These are just the basics of dealing with database. So there will be more advanced things that we'll add, like querying and filtering and sorting later. Okay, this should be enough of a high-level preview. We're going to dive into actually building this application in the next video, and it's going to have this kind of asynchronous flow, and it's going to have these CRUD operations using Firebase.